A simple stop at a countryside store led him to the greatest love of his life. These words might seem exaggerated. They might seem taken from a fairy tale or a romantic movie. But what happened on that day was so real and transformative that it could never be forgotten. Henrique was a man accustomed to rushing. He lived in the big city, surrounded by commitments, business deals, and responsibilities that left him no time even to breathe. His car was always full of folders, his cell phone constantly ringing, his gaze fixed on goals and numbers. He did not believe in coincidences, nor in destiny. For him, everything was the result of effort, discipline, and rational choices. The heart, for Henrique, was merely a muscle pumping blood through his veins, nothing more than an organ keeping him alive. But on one morning on the road, driving back home after a business trip in another region, everything changed. The car needed fuel and his stomach needed food. He did not value stops along the way, normally only filling up at large chain stations where everything was predictable and efficient. However, on that particular day, the road was empty and the fuel gauge was dangerously close to empty, forcing him to take the next exit. That is how he arrived at a small countryside town, where time seemed to run slowly, where the pace of life was measured not in minutes but in moments, where people still knew each other by name and greeted one another with genuine warmth. In the center of the small town, beside a flowery square with old wooden benches and trees that had witnessed generations pass by, there was a simple store with an old facade, with a faded sign that read, Sarah General Store. Henrique parked in front, finding it strange how different this was from the world he knew, from the modern shopping centers and sleek supermarkets of the city. He pushed open the wooden door, which creaked as it opened, and a small bell hanging above tinkled, announcing his arrival. The smell of wood, fresh coffee, and spices took over his senses, filling his lungs with something he had not experienced in years. Wooden shelves displayed various products, from basic groceries to handmade crafts. He found it strange as he could not remember the last time he had been in such a simple place, so untouched by the relentless march of modernization. And it was there, in that instant, that his eyes met hers. Behind the counter, wearing a light apron and with a gaze full of life, stood Anna. Her hair was tied back in an unpretentious manner, letting a few strands escape that framed her face like a painting. Her brown eyes shone as if they reflected the very light of the place, warm and inviting, and her smile, though timid, had something welcoming about it that made Henrique forget for a moment everything else that existed in the world outside those wooden walls. She greeted him naturally with a voice that was soft but clear. "Good morning, welcome. Do you need something in particular?" Henrique took a few seconds to respond, caught off guard by the simplicity and genuineness of her greeting. Her voice seemed to pull him out of a trance, to wake him from the automatic mode he had been living in for so many years. He swallowed hard and stammered, "Right. I am just looking around." While he walked through the narrow aisles of the store, trying to appear interested in the products lined up neatly on the shelves, his gaze kept returning to the counter. It was as if every gesture of Anna, every simple movement as she organized packages or attended to another customer, had a magic that he had never seen before, a grace that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than mere physical beauty. Henrique bought some things he did not even need, just to prolong his stay there. A bag of local coffee, some homemade cookies, a jar of honey. When he approached the register, he noticed better the way Anna observed him, without hurry, without judgment, just with that sweet and truthful look that seemed to cross the barriers he himself had erected over the years, walls built of ambition and the fear of vulnerability. "You are not from here, are you?" she asked while passing the products through the old cash register, her fingers moving with practiced ease. "No," Henrique smiled, noticing that his voice came out softer than normal, more genuine than the business voice he usually employed. "I am just passing through." "Well, that is what I thought. We always recognize who comes from outside. The way is different, the look too." Those simple words touched Henrique in a strange way, resonating in places within him he thought had long been sealed shut. The look is different. Could she see beyond the image of the busy and cold man he projected to the world? Could she perceive the emptiness beneath the success, the loneliness hidden behind the expensive suits and confident handshakes? He left the store with the bags in hand, but something inside him stayed trapped there, as if an invisible thread now connected his heart to that simple place. When he got into the car, he realized that his heart was beating faster, as if it wanted to prevent him from leaving. as if it recognized something precious that his rational mind had not yet fully grasped. And against all his logic, against every instinct that had guided his life until that moment, he did not start the car. He sat there motionless for long minutes, looking through the rearview mirror at the small store and the reflection of the young woman behind the counter. Henrique could not explain it, but he had the feeling that if he left without returning, he would lose something he would never find again in his entire life. And it was in that instant, in that seemingly banal choice, that his destiny began to be written in a completely new way, in ink that could not be erased. Henrique remained inside the car, motionless for long minutes, watching the small store through the rearview mirror. The bags with unnecessary purchases rested on the seat beside him, but his mind was distant, confused, caught in a storm of unfamiliar emotions. He was a man accustomed to fast and objective decisions, to weighing pros and cons in seconds, and moving forward without hesitation. However, something inside him was shouting not to start the car, not to drive away, not to let this moment slip through his fingers like so many others had throughout his calculated life. There was a knot in his chest, and restlessness he had not felt in years, perhaps never with such intensity. He took a deep breath, looked around at the quiet street, at the old houses with their colorful facades, at the church steeple rising against the blue sky, trying to find a rational excuse to return to the store. His mind, trained to solve problems and find solutions, finally offered him one. The car's tank still needed fuel. Perhaps he could ask where there was a gas station in town. Yes, that would sound natural, normal, not like a man desperately searching for a reason to see a woman smile one more time. With that thought providing him the justification he needed, he turned off the rearview mirror, opened the door, and walked back to Sarah General Store, his heart pounding harder with each step. When he entered again, the small bell above the door rang out its cheerful announcement, and Anna raised her eyes from the counter. Her smile appeared immediately, as if that return was the most natural thing in the world, as if she had somehow known he would come back. "Did you forget something?" she asked with a light voice, but with a note of curiosity that suggested she suspected there might be more to his return than a forgotten item. Henrique adjusted his jacket, trying to appear casual, trying to hide the fact that his pulse had quickened the moment their eyes met again. "Actually, yes. I wanted to know if there is a gas station around here." Anna wiped her hands on a dish towel and pointed toward the street, her gesture graceful and unhurried. "There is a small station right after the bridge, about 2 kilometers away. It is the only one in town, but the owner is trustworthy." Henrique thanked her, but he did not leave. He remained there, letting his eyes wander over the details of the store, taking in everything he had only glimpsed before. The rustic wooden shelves that had probably stood there for decades, the glass jars filled with colorful candies that sparkled in the sunlight streaming through the window, the old radio playing soft music in the background, creating an atmosphere of timeless peace. There was a peace in that place that contrasted sharply with the rush of his life, with the constant pressure and the never-ending demands that filled every waking moment in the city. Anna noticed his silence, the way he seemed to be drinking in the atmosphere, and added, as if wanting to extend the conversation, as if she too felt something pulling them together, "Do you travel a lot?" He hesitated for a moment, then responded with the honesty that surprised even himself. "More than I should. Sometimes I think I spend more time on roads and in offices than at home." "It must be tiring," she said, arranging some packages of flour on the counter with care. "Here in town everything is slower, sometimes even too slow, but I like it that way." Henrique smiled slightly, feeling something shift inside him, something softening. "And have you always worked here?" Anna nodded her head, a strand of hair falling across her forehead. "This store belonged to my grandfather. Then it passed to my father. Now I help take care of it. It is not glamorous work, but it is our life." Her words resonated deeply within Henrique. He, who had always sought success in numbers and profits, in quarterly reports and market share, suddenly perceived the difference in her simple tone, a tone loaded with belonging, with roots, with meaning that went beyond material gain. There, in that small store, there was more sense of purpose than in many of the skyscrapers he frequented, more authenticity than in countless boardroom meetings. Anna, for her part, was noticing that different man standing in her store. The way he looked at her was not that of someone who merely saw a shopkeeper behind a counter. It was as if he could see beyond the surface, as if he was genuinely curious about her story, about what made her who she was. And that awakened something in her heart that she herself did not fully understand. A flutter of possibility. A whisper of something that might be beginning. Henrique ended up buying a freshly brewed coffee that Anna offered, and he sat in one of the wooden chairs leaning near the window, positioned where he could watch the square outside and the life of the small town unfolding at its gentle pace. He stayed there taking small sips while observing her attend to other customers, mesmerized by the grace in her every movement. Each gesture was simple, but carried with such delicacy, such genuine care. The way she carefully wrapped a package, the warm smile she gave to an elderly lady, the patience with which she explained prices to a child counting coins with concentrated seriousness in his small hands. He did not know exactly how much time passed, but when he stood up to leave, dusk was already falling, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Anna wished him a safe journey, and Henrique responded only with a "see you later," words that came out without him planning them, as if his heart was already making promises his mind had not yet consciously acknowledged. When he got into the car again, he felt like he was leaving something precious behind, something he might never find again. On the way to the gas station, he reflected on what had happened, trying to make sense of the turmoil of emotions swirling inside him. It made no sense to feel so stirred by someone he had just met, by a brief encounter that should have been nothing more than a forgettable stop on a long journey. But Anna's gaze would not leave his mind. It was not just beauty. Although she had a simple, striking beauty that was undeniable, it was something deeper, more profound. It was as if there was truth in her eyes, as if for the first time in a very long time, someone had truly seen him, had looked past the expensive clothes and the confident demeanor to see the man underneath, lonely and searching for something he could not name. That night, already in a roadside hotel where the neon sign flickered and the walls were thin, Henrique could not sleep. He tossed and turned from one side to the other, trying to concentrate on the commitments of the following day, on the contracts waiting for his signature, on the meetings that demanded his attention. But all that came to his mind was the image of Anna behind the counter, smiling in that sweet and genuine way that seemed to illuminate not just the store but something dark and forgotten within his own soul. The next day, instead of heading straight to the big city, instead of returning to his life of obligations and expectations, Henrique made an unexpected detour, one that would change everything. He returned to the small town, telling himself that he needed to buy a few more things before continuing his journey. But deep down he knew it was just an excuse to see her again, to confirm that what he had felt the day before was real and not just a trick of exhaustion and loneliness. And when he entered Sarah General Store again, he found Anna laughing at something a child had said, with the morning light illuminating her hair like a halo, making her look almost ethereal. Henrique realized in that instant that something much bigger was happening, something that terrified and exhilarated him in equal measure. This was not just a stop at a countryside store. This was the beginning of a story that would forever change his life, that would challenge everything he thought he knew about himself and what truly mattered. Henrique returned to Sarah General Store that morning with the excuse of buying something he actually did not need. He asked for some homemade sweets that looked delicious in their glass jars, a package of flour even though he rarely cooked, and even a small handmade wooden souvenir just to have the chance to talk a few more minutes with Anna, to hear her voice, to see her smile directed at him. She received him with the same welcoming smile as the day before, without seeming surprised to see him there again, as if somehow she had been expecting him. "You came back quickly," she commented playfully, her eyes twinkling with amusement. "Did you forget something else?" Henrique laughed, a little embarrassed by the transparency of his excuse. "Right. I guess so. This place has a different air about it. It made me want to spend more time here." Anna did not respond immediately, just continued serving him, while her eyes shone discreetly, revealing that his words had touched her in a way she had not expected. That simple but sincere response planted a small seed in her heart, a seed of hope that perhaps this unexpected visitor might be different from the others who passed through town and were never seen again. Henrique began to find pretexts to return to the small town with increasing frequency. Sometimes he claimed he needed to refuel, other times that he was passing through the area for business. On all occasions, he made a point of stopping at the store, of seeing Anna, of spending a few precious minutes in her presence. With each visit, he learned a little more about Anna and about the peaceful life of that place, so different from everything he had known. He discovered that she lived with her elderly mother, Dona Helena, and that the two of them had maintained the store since the death of Anna's father several years ago. The store did not yield great profits, but it supported the family with dignity, providing them with enough to live modestly but comfortably. He also discovered that Anna loved to read, that she sometimes stayed late at the store just to be able to open a book while waiting for the last customers, losing herself in worlds far from the small town where she had spent her entire life. "I always like to imagine stories bigger than this little town," she told him one afternoon while arranging glass jars on the shelf, her voice wistful. "But at the same time, I am afraid to leave behind what we have built here, afraid of losing the roots that anchor me." Henrique listened to her attentively, admiring the way she talked about life, with simplicity and yet with such depth, with an understanding of what truly mattered that he had somehow lost along the way. He, who had always lived chasing grandiose objectives, accumulating achievements that looked impressive on paper but felt hollow inside, realized he had never stopped to value the small details of life, the moments that could not be quantified or put in a financial report. The visits became longer and longer, stretching from minutes to hours. Henrique began to sit on one of the wooden benches near the window, drinking coffee brewed fresh each time, and observing the movement of the town unfolding before him like a slow, peaceful river. The store was more than just a shop. It was a meeting point where neighbors exchanged news and gossip, where children laughed and played with the old cat that lived there, where elderly men traded old stories of the town's history, keeping memories alive for the next generation. All of this was new to Henrique, but at the same time it awakened a feeling of belonging that he had never experienced in the anonymous crowds of the big city. A sense of being part of something real and enduring. Anna, for her part, began to wait for him without realizing it, without admitting it even to herself. When the bell above the door rang and it was Henrique who entered, her heart raced in a way that both frightened and delighted her. She tried to disguise her feelings, serving him with the same kindness she showed all customers. But inside something was changing, shifting like tectonic plates beneath the surface. It was as if that man from outside brought a different wind, a breath of newness that stirred her dreams and made her question the boundaries of her small world. One afternoon, after the store had emptied and they found themselves alone in the quiet space, Anna allowed herself to ask a question she had been keeping for days, turning it over in her mind. "Henrique, do you always travel alone?" He looked at her, surprised by the curiosity, by the personal nature of the question, but he responded with sincerity, with an openness that felt both liberating and vulnerable. "Always. I have had relationships, but nothing lasting, nothing that felt truly deep. In the end, it seems that the rush of my life always pushes people away." Anna lowered her gaze, fidgeting with her hands, and murmured softly, "Yes, rushing tends to ruin things." That phrase stayed in his mind like an echo, simple but profoundly true. The rushing had stolen from him many moments, many opportunities, many possibilities for real connection. And now, standing before her, he felt the desire to stop time, to live each second calmly, to savor every moment like the coffee she brewed with such care. As the days passed, turning into weeks, the bond between them deepened in ways neither had anticipated. Henrique began to help with small things around the store, carrying heavy boxes that would have been difficult for Anna to manage alone, arranging shelves with products organized by category, fixing a burned-out light bulb that had been neglected. It was strange for him, a man accustomed to signing multi-million-dollar contracts, to feel useful just by changing a light bulb or sweeping the floor. But it was precisely there, in those small gestures, in those humble acts of service, that he felt most human, most connected to something real and meaningful. The residents began to comment among themselves, as residents of small towns always do. "Who is that man from the city who is always at the store?" they whispered over fences and in the square. Some thought he was just passing through, that his presence was temporary and would soon be nothing but a memory. Others suspected there was something more, that perhaps a romance was blossoming under their watchful eyes. Anna heard the comments with a certain discomfort, knowing that in a small town, privacy was a luxury few enjoyed. But deep down she knew that her heart was becoming more and more involved, more entangled with this unexpected visitor who had walked into her life and turned everything upside down. And Henrique, even without admitting it out loud, even without speaking the words that were forming in his heart, already knew the truth. He did not return to that store because of the products, nor because of the excuse of the gas station or the road conditions. He returned because of her. Because Anna had become the center around which his world now revolved, the compass pointing him towards something he had been searching for without knowing it. On a rainy night, after a long day when fatigue showed on both their faces, the store was almost closing when the lights suddenly went out, plunging everything into darkness. Anna sighed, already accustomed to the failures of the town's electrical grid, which often struggled during storms. But before she could reach for the flashlight, Henrique stood up and said with quiet confidence, "Let me handle this." He searched for a candle on the counter, his hands moving surely despite the darkness, and lit it. The flame illuminated Anna's face softly, creating an almost magical atmosphere, shadows dancing on the walls. The two stood in silence for a few moments, just looking at each other under the trembling candlelight, the world outside forgotten. The sound of rain beating on the tin roof completed the scene, creating a cocoon of intimacy. It was in that moment that Henrique had absolute certainty, a clarity that cut through all doubt and fear. That woman, in that small town, in that simple store, was transforming his life in a way he had never imagined possible, in a way that made all his previous achievements seem pale and insignificant. And while the rain fell outside, washing the streets and nourishing the earth, he made a silent decision that he would not let her slip away, that he would fight for this unexpected love that had taken root in his heart, growing stronger with each passing day. In the days following that rainy night, after the moment when the candle illuminated Anna's face in a way that seemed to freeze time itself, Henrique could not forget that image. It pursued him in dreams and thoughts throughout every day, appearing when he was supposed to be concentrating on work, on numbers, on strategies. He tried to convince himself that it was just a passing enchantment, a product of the simple and welcoming atmosphere of that place so different from his usual world. But deep down he knew there was something much bigger happening inside him, something that could not be dismissed or ignored. In the big city where he spent most of his life, where his office occupied the top floor of a gleaming tower, the commitments did not stop. The phone rang every minute with urgent matters that supposedly could not wait. Endless meetings filled his calendar, tight deadlines created constant pressure, millionaire negotiations demanded his attention and expertise. Henrique fulfilled everything mechanically, going through the motions like an actor performing a role he had memorized long ago. But his mind and his heart were far away, in that small countryside store, where time seemed to decelerate, where life moved to a gentler rhythm. It was as if there were two versions of himself now, the powerful businessman that everyone knew and respected, and the simple man that Anna was making awaken, the man he had perhaps always been underneath the layers of ambition and achievement. He began to find ways increasingly frequent to return to the small town, at first with plausible excuses, carefully constructed reasons that would satisfy anyone who asked. He claimed to be visiting suppliers in nearby areas, or resolving matters in the countryside that required his personal attention. Then there were no more excuses, no more pretenses. He would get in his car on a random Saturday, drive for hours through winding roads, and park in front of the store just to see her, just to spend time in her presence, to feel the peace that seemed to emanate from her very being. And Anna, with each reunion, tried to disguise how much that presence affected her, how much her heart leaped when she heard the familiar sound of his car pulling up outside. The residents began to notice even more, their curiosity growing with each of Henrique's visits. An elderly gentleman, a loyal customer of the store who had been coming there since Anna's grandfather ran it, commented loudly one morning, speaking to no one in particular but loud enough for everyone to hear. "That man from the capital has been coming here too often, and he always stays much longer than necessary." Anna smiled awkwardly, trying to deflect the subject, to redirect the conversation to safer topics. But when Henrique heard similar comments on other occasions, caught fragments of whispered conversations that stopped when he entered a room, he began to worry. He knew that in small towns conversations spread fast, faster than wildfire, and that if he was not careful he could end up pressuring Anna without meaning to, putting her in an uncomfortable position with her neighbors and friends. One day, while helping to organize some sacks of supplies in the storage room at the back of the store, surrounded by the smell of grains and spices, he gathered the courage to ask a question that had been weighing on him. "Anna, people talk a lot about my presence here. Does that bother you?" She remained silent for a few seconds, fidgeting with a notebook full of handwritten inventory notes before responding, her voice soft but honest. "People always talk. It is normal, it is just the way things are in a place like this. But to be honest, what worries me is not what they say. What worries me is not knowing if everything you do is temporary, if one day you will just disappear as suddenly as you appeared. Enrique felt as if his heart was being squeezed from the inside, as if a giant hand was crushing it. It was the first time she had let slip a hint of vulnerability, revealing the fear she had been guarding, the uncertainty that lay beneath her smiles. "Anna," he said, his voice firm but loaded with emotion that made it tremble slightly. "I know I seem like someone from another world to you, and maybe I really am in many ways. But when I am here, I do not miss anything I left out there. Nothing at all. Do you understand? This is where I want to be." Anna raised her eyes to him, searching his face for any sign of deception, any hint that these were just pretty words. She saw none. There was no falsehood in that look. It was sincere, it was raw, it was real in a way that took her breath away. Even so, doubt still lingered, hovering like a ghost between them. How far would he really be willing to go for her? Would he truly be able to leave behind the life he had built, the success he had achieved, the world that had shaped him? That same week, Enrique was invited to an important dinner in his city, a glittering affair at an exclusive restaurant where crystal chandeliers sparkled and waiters moved like shadows. It was an opportunity to close an international contract that could multiply his fortune several times over, that could cement his reputation as one of the most successful businessmen in his field. But for the first time in years, he could not concentrate on the numbers being discussed, on the proposals being floated, on the investors trying to catch his attention. He was there in the middle of an elegant hall, surrounded by influential people in expensive suits and designer dresses, but his mind was at a simple wooden table inside a store lit by candles, where laughter came easily and conversation flowed naturally. At the end of the dinner, after the contracts had been tentatively discussed and the champagne glasses emptied, one of his partners noticed his distraction, the way his responses had been automatic and his attention had wandered. "Enrique, is everything all right? You seem distant tonight, almost like you are somewhere else entirely." He smiled slightly, a private smile that held secrets, and responded quietly, almost to himself. "I think I found something more important than all our business deals combined." The partner laughed, thinking it was just a joke, just fatigue talking. But Enrique knew he had spoken the absolute truth, words that came from a place deeper than logic or reason. Back in the small town, back where his heart kept pulling him like a magnet, he began to approach not only Anna but also her world, the community that had shaped her. He talked with the residents, learning their names and their stories, helped carry groceries for elderly ladies who remembered when the town was even smaller, sat in the square to listen to old stories told by men who had lived through wars and hardships, who carried history in their weathered faces. The more he involved himself, the more he realized he did not want to be just a passing visitor, just a temporary curiosity. He wanted to belong, to put down roots, to be part of something real and lasting. Anna, on the other hand, was fighting an internal battle, her heart and her mind pulling in different directions. Her heart was already completely involved, already dreaming of possibilities she had long ago convinced herself were not meant for someone like her. But fear made her hold back the feelings that wanted to overflow, made her build walls to protect herself from potential heartbreak. Sometimes, when she saw Enrique laugh with a child or patiently talk with an elderly customer, her heart filled with hope, swelling with the possibility that maybe, just maybe, this could work. Other times, she remembered that he came from a distant universe, full of obligations she could not begin to understand, and she feared that everything was just an illusion, a beautiful dream that would shatter when reality came crashing back. One quiet afternoon, as they closed the store together in a routine that had become comfortable and familiar, Enrique finally made a decision. He approached slowly, taking his time, breathed deeply to steady himself, and said words that had been building inside him for weeks. "Anna, I cannot keep pretending I come here by chance, that these visits are random or casual. I come because it is you I want to see. You changed my way of looking at life, of understanding what truly matters. I know it seems fast, I know we have not known each other long, but I have never had such clarity about something in my entire life. I have never been more certain of anything." The silence that followed was heavy with meaning, weighted with emotion, but it was not uncomfortable. Anna felt her hands tremble, felt her heart race so fast she thought it might burst. She did not respond immediately, wanting to be sure, needing to be certain. She just looked into his eyes, trying to find signs of truth, searching for any hint of doubt or deception, and she found truth, pure and undeniable. But instead of surrendering immediately, instead of giving in to what her heart was screaming, she whispered words that showed both her feelings and her caution. "I believe you, Henrique. I do. But I need time to be sure. Time to understand what this means." Henrique nodded, understanding flowing through him, respecting her rhythm and her need for certainty. He did not try to rush her, did not try to pressure her into a decision she was not ready to make. He just held her hand for a few seconds in silence, a gesture that spoke volumes, like someone promising to wait as long as necessary, like someone saying without words that this was not a temporary infatuation, but something deep and enduring. And it was in that instant, in that simple gesture that carried the weight of real commitment, that Anna began to understand, began to believe that maybe this man really was willing to stay, that maybe he was not just another passage through her life, but the beginning of something that could last forever. After that conversation, when Henrique finally opened his heart completely, laying bare his feelings without reservation, the following days brought a mixture of hope and uncertainty for both of them. Anna, although touched by his sincerity, by the raw honesty in his voice, could not completely dismiss the fear that everything might be temporary, that the magic might fade when real life intruded. After all, men like Henrique did not appear every day in her life, in her small world. And when they did appear, when someone from outside came into her life, they usually left as quickly as they arrived, leaving nothing but memories and what-ifs. Henrique, for his part, was increasingly convinced that he needed to fight for that love, that this was worth whatever sacrifice might be required. But the fight would not be easy. He knew that with growing certainty. His world out there, his life in the city, had not disappeared like morning mist. Phone calls from partners continued to come with regularity, each one more urgent than the last. Unavoidable commitments filled his schedule, and urgent emails never stopped arriving, demanding immediate responses and quick decisions. He tried to organize himself to reconcile everything, to somehow bridge these two worlds that seemed increasingly incompatible. But he was beginning to realize that to truly be present with Anna, to give her what she deserved, he would have to make difficult choices, choices that might cost him everything he had built. One morning, while helping Anna restock the sacks of rice and beans on the wooden shelves, his cell phone vibrated insistently in his pocket, breaking the peaceful silence of the store. He answered and heard the anxious voice of his assistant, a young man who had worked for him for years. "Mr. Henrique, we need you at the office immediately. There has been a problem with the international negotiation. If we do not resolve this by tomorrow, we could lose millions, possibly tens of millions. The entire deal could collapse." Henrique looked at Anna, who was pretending not to listen but was clearly aware of the conversation, tension visible in the set of her shoulders. He took a deep breath, feeling torn between two worlds, two lives, two versions of himself. "I will be there tomorrow," he finally said, the words feeling heavy in his mouth. He hung up the phone and tried to continue helping, to maintain the normalcy of the moment. But Anna, with her voice low and careful, commented in a way that revealed her deepest fears. "Sometimes I wonder if I am not interfering in your life, if I am not keeping you from things that are important." Henrique stopped what he was doing and approached her, his movements deliberate and sure. "Anna, you do not interfere with anything. Quite the opposite. You are the only thing that gives me peace in the middle of so much chaos, the only thing that makes sense when everything else feels empty." She smiled, but the smile did not hide the doubt in her eyes, the uncertainty that no words could completely erase. Meanwhile, the comments in town intensified, growing like weeds after rain. Some residents rooted for the couple, enchanted by seeing that man from the capital fall in love with someone as simple and genuine as Anna, seeing it as a fairy tale come to life in their small town. Others, however, distrusted his intentions, their skepticism born from experience and disappointment. There were those who said he was just amusing himself, that he would soon leave and leave Anna with a broken heart, that men like him never truly changed. These words inevitably reached Anna, carried on the wind of gossip, spoken in hushed tones that somehow always found their way to her ears. One night, after hearing two neighbor women gossiping in the market, their voices low but not low enough, Anna arrived home with a heavy heart, feeling the weight of doubt pressing down on her. She sat at the table with her mother, Donna Helena, a woman whose weathered hands told stories of hard work and perseverance, and poured out her feelings. "Mother, I do not know if I should believe in Henrique. He seems sincere. Everything about him seems real. But what if it is just an illusion? What if I am setting myself up for heartbreak? Her mother looked at her with tenderness, with the wisdom that comes only from living a full life. Daughter, love always comes with risks, with the possibility of pain. But we cannot live locked away by fear of suffering, cannot let the possibility of hurt keep us from experiencing joy. The question is not if he will leave or not, is not about guarantees or certainties. The question is if you are willing to live in the present moment, to embrace what is happening now, even without guarantees for tomorrow. The words touched her deeply, resonated with something true within her, but the doubt continued to linger like a shadow. The next day, Enrique appeared at the store with a simple but meaningful gift. It was an old book of poetry he had found in a used bookstore in the big city, its pages yellowed with age. He remembered that Anna loved to read, remembered the wistful way she had spoken about stories and dreams, and he wanted to surprise her with something that showed he paid attention, that he listened not just to her words but to the meaning beneath them. When he gave her the book, she was moved almost to tears, not by the object itself but by the gesture of attention, by the care it represented. "You remembered," she said, leafing through the worn pages with reverence, as if they were precious. "Nobody ever gave me a gift like this, something that shows they really see me." Enrique smiled, his heart full. "That is because nobody ever noticed how special you are, how much depth there is in you." She almost let herself be carried away by the emotion, almost let the walls fall completely. But fear was still there, lurking. She carefully stored the book, thanked him with genuine warmth, but did not completely surrender, did not fully open her heart. Enrique noticed her hesitation, saw the walls she kept between them. He knew he would have to prove, not just with words but with concrete actions, that he was there to stay, that this was not a passing fancy but a fundamental change in the direction of his life. And that proof would come sooner than he imagined, in a form that would test everything he thought he knew about himself and what he was willing to sacrifice. A few days later, he received another call from his partner, this one even more urgent than the last. The company was about to lose a contract that represented not just money but also prestige, international recognition, the kind of opportunity that came once in a lifetime. Enrique would have to travel for months to personally follow the negotiation, to be present in multiple countries, to dedicate himself completely to this massive undertaking. That night, lying in his bed in the big city, staring at the ceiling as lights from passing cars made patterns on the walls, he found himself divided like never before in his life. On one side was the life he had built with so much effort, made of conquests and recognition, of achievements that his younger self had dreamed of success that others envied. On the other side was the simple life that was beginning to bloom in the countryside. With Anna, a life full of uncertainties but loaded with a true feeling he had never felt before. A sense of rightness and belonging that no amount of money could buy. While he faced the ceiling, unable to sleep, he thought to himself in the darkness, "What good is having everything if I do not have someone to share it with? What is the point of all this success if I am empty inside?" He decided that when he returned to the small town, he would have to be honest with Anna about his dilemma, about the choice he was facing. He knew that conversation could change everything between them, could be the moment when their future was decided one way or another. And so, with his heart racing and his mind full of doubts and questions, Enrique prepared himself to take the next step, a step that would define whether that love would resist or not the differences between their worlds, whether what they felt was strong enough to bridge the gap between two lives that seemed impossible to reconcile. Enrique returned to the countryside days later, his car carrying the weight of the decision he needed to make, a decision that felt heavier than any business contract he had ever signed. The car parked in front of the store, and before he even opened the door, he sat motionless for several minutes, breathing deeply, trying to organize the whirlwind of thoughts and emotions swirling inside him like a storm. On one side was the international proposal that could establish him even more firmly in the business world, that could make him a legend in his industry. On the other side was that nascent love, fragile and yet so intense, that was already transforming the way he saw life, the way he understood what truly mattered. When he entered the store, Anna was attending to an elderly lady, carefully wrapping her purchases with practiced hands, and the bell above the door announced his arrival with its familiar cheerful ring. She smiled when she saw him, but she immediately noticed there was something different in his expression, something heavy. There was fatigue visible in the lines around his eyes, doubt in the set of his shoulders, but also determination in his jaw. As soon as the customer left, carrying her packages with thanks and goodbyes, he approached the counter. "Anna, we need to talk," he said, his voice serious in a way she had not heard before. "Really talk." She felt a chill run down her spine, a premonition of something important coming. "Of course. Do you want to sit down?" They went to one of the simple tables in the store, the same place where they had shared so many light conversations, where laughter had come easily and time had seemed to stop. But this would be different. This conversation would be a turning point. Henrique held her hands across the table, looked directly into her eyes with an intensity that made her breath catch, and began to speak words that had been rehearsing in his mind during the entire drive. "I received a proposal, a huge negotiation, the kind that can change the direction of my company forever, that can make me more successful than I ever dreamed. But to do it, I would have to travel, to be away for months, maybe longer. And I cannot imagine spending that time without you, cannot imagine being on the other side of the world while my heart is here." Anna widened her eyes, not knowing what to say, her mind racing through possibilities and implications. He continued, the words flowing now like a river that had broken through a dam. "I do not want to lose you, Anna. You have become the most important thing in my life. But I also cannot ignore that my world is made of these responsibilities, these commitments that I made years ago. I am torn between what I built until today and what I discovered now with you. I am asking you to understand the impossible position I am in, to help me see the way forward." The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken fears and hopes. Anna, with tears beginning to form in her eyes, finally spoke words that came from a place of deep honesty, of vulnerability. "Henrique, I never asked you for anything, never asked you to stay or to change your life for me. But I also do not know if I can live waiting for someone who is always divided between two worlds, someone whose heart is never fully here. I deserve someone who can be fully present, who does not see me as a complication but as a choice they want to make." Her words hit him like a physical blow, struck at the very core of his dilemma. It was the naked truth, honest and painful. He realized that it was not enough just to promise, to speak beautiful words that meant nothing without action. He needed to prove through his choices what truly mattered to him, what he was willing to sacrifice for love. That same night, he walked alone through the streets of the small town, his footsteps echoing on the quiet sidewalks, reflecting on his entire life. He remembered the countless awards gathering dust on shelves, the international trips where he had been too busy to even notice the beauty of the places he visited, the million-dollar contracts that had brought momentary satisfaction but never lasting fulfillment. And he realized that none of it had ever warmed his heart the way the simple moments beside Anna did, the way her smile made him feel truly alive. The next day, at dawn when the sky was just beginning to lighten, Henrique made his decision. He picked up his cell phone, his hands steady despite the magnitude of what he was about to do, called his partner, and with a firm voice that surprised even himself, announced words that would change everything. "I am not going to accept the proposal. If this means losing prestige, losing the respect of my peers, so be it. I found something more important than any business deal, more valuable than any amount of money. I found something worth building a life around." On the other side of the line, his partner was incredulous, stammering objections and warnings. But Henrique did not waver, did not second-guess himself. For the first time in years, he was choosing not for money or status, but for his heart, for a future that looked different from anything he had planned, but felt more right than anything he had ever done. Immediately after, without wasting a moment, he went straight to the store. Anna was arranging the shelves, unaware of the decision he had made, of the bridge he had just burned behind him. When he entered, determined and purposeful, he approached her, held her hands tightly, looked into her eyes with complete certainty, and said words that would change both their lives forever. "I chose to stay. I chose you. It may seem crazy to give up so much for something that is just beginning, for something without guarantees, but I have never been so sure of a decision in my entire life. I do not want to live divided anymore, torn between two worlds. I want to live by your side, to build something real and lasting with you." Anna brought her hands to her face, overcome with emotion, tears flowing freely now. They were not tears of sadness but of relief, of joy, of finally believing that this was real. She embraced him with force, like someone finally accepting that what seemed too good to be true was actually happening, was actually real. The comments in town spread even faster than before, traveling from house to house with the speed that only small-town gossip achieves. Some called Henrique crazy, said he had lost his mind to give up so much for a woman he barely knew. Others called him a romantic, said it was like something from a movie or a fairy tale come to life. But for him, nothing mattered beyond the certainty that he was beside the woman who gave meaning to his life, who had shown him what it meant to truly live rather than just exist. In the following days, he began to adapt to the routine of the countryside, to the slower pace and simpler pleasures. He helped in the store every day, learned to deal with local suppliers who had their own way of doing business, and even began to connect with the residents, who gradually began to accept him as one of their own rather than an outsider. As time passed, Anna realized that his decision had not been just empty words, just a romantic gesture that would fade with time. Henrique was really willing to live that new chapter, simpler and perhaps less brilliant in the eyes of the world, but infinitely more true for his heart, infinitely more fulfilling for his soul. What neither of them knew yet was that by choosing love above everything else, by putting their relationship before ambition and security, they were only at the beginning of the most intense story of their lives. A story that would have its challenges but would ultimately prove that real love is worth any sacrifice, any risk, any leap of faith into the unknown. Time passed, and Henrique transformed before the eyes of Anna and the small town, becoming someone new while also becoming more himself than he had ever been. The hurried man, full of commitments, always checking his watch and his phone, began to give way to someone who knew how to savor each detail of simple life. The smell of coffee brewed fresh in the morning became a ritual he looked forward to each day, something to be savored rather than gulped down while racing to a meeting. The sound of birds in the square became a symphony he actually stopped to listen to, rather than background noise to ignore. The smiles of neighbors when he passed on the sidewalk became genuine connections rather than obligations or distractions. What had seemed at first like just a passing experience, a temporary detour from his real life, was now routine. And more than that, it was genuine happiness, the kind he had read about but never truly understood. At the store, the two worked side by side in a partnership that felt natural and right. Anna took care of the register and the customers, managing accounts and orders with careful attention. Meanwhile, Henrique took charge of organizing the shelves, with a precision that made her smile, carrying heavy sacks that would have been difficult for her to manage alone, and even learning to deal with the local suppliers who had their own rhythms and their own ways of conducting business. It was not rare to see him playing with the children who came in to buy candies, their laughter filling the store, or laughing at the stories of the elderly men who always stopped to chat, treating the store like a second home. Little by little, he stopped being the man from the capital, the outsider who had disrupted their quiet town, and became simply Henrique, part of the community, someone who belonged. Even so, challenges did not disappear completely like morning mist. Some residents continued to be suspicious, their distrust born from seeing too many people come and go, from witnessing promises broken and hopes disappointed. They murmured that it would not last, that eventually the pull of his old life would prove too strong. One of them even said to Anna in a tone of warning that carried the weight of experience, "Be careful, girl. Rich men do not get used to simple life. He will leave soon enough and you will be left here alone with a broken heart." Anna listened in silence, but inside herself she no longer had the same fear that had haunted her in the beginning. Henrique had proven with consistent actions over time that he was not there as a passing visitor, that he had truly chosen this life. Still, from time to time insecurity surfaced, old fears rising like ghosts. In those moments, all she had to do was look into his eyes to make all doubts disappear like shadows before the sun. One afternoon, after a particularly busy day when the store had been full of customers and activity, Henrique and Anna closed the shop together as had become their routine. The sun was setting on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold that seemed almost unreal in their beauty. Sitting on the small back porch where Donna Helena used to tend her plants, surrounded by the scent of jasmine and roses, Henrique held Anna's hand and spoke with a voice that was firm but also tender. "I know many people still doubt me, still expect me to leave one day. I also know that sometimes you are afraid, that the fear comes back when you least expect it. But I want you to know something important. There is no contract, no fortune, no trip in the world capable of taking me away from you. If I had the courage to give up everything I built, it was because I found here something I never found anywhere else. I found home. I found peace. I found you." Anna, with tears running down her cheeks, tears that caught the last light of the setting sun, leaned her head on his shoulder in a gesture of complete trust. I know, Henrique. I feel that every day in 1,000 small ways. It just scares me sometimes how much everything changed so suddenly, how quickly my whole life shifted in a new direction. He smiled and hugged her tightly, feeling her heartbeat against his chest. Sometimes the truest things in life are those that arrive without warning, that come when we are not even looking for them. From that day forward, there were no more reservations between them, no more walls or defenses. Love flourished in its fullest form, blooming like the flowers in Donna Helena's garden. Henrique began to plan small outings that became cherished memories, walks through the countryside where wildflowers grew in abundance, picnics by the river where the water sang over smooth stones, nights under the stars in the backyard where they talked until dawn about everything and nothing. For him, it was not the grand gestures that mattered anymore, not the expensive gifts or elaborate plans. It was the simple moments shared with Anna, the ordinary days that became extraordinary simply because they were together. And Anna, who had been so fearful before, so certain that people like her did not get fairy tale endings, began to dream without fear. She talked about the future openly now, about projects to improve the store and make it even more welcoming, even about the possibility of traveling with Henrique to see places she had only read about in her beloved books, to experience the wider world while knowing they had this place to return to. For the first time in her life, she allowed herself to believe without reservation that she deserved to live a great love, without having to give up the life she had built, without having to choose between love and home. Donna Helena, who had been observing everything in silence from the beginning, who had watched her daughter's transformation with a mother's careful eye, was the first to bless the couple with words that carried the weight of a lifetime of wisdom. You found each other because it was meant to be. Because some things are written in the stars before we are even born. Neither the rush of the city nor the fear of the heart were capable of preventing what was destined to happen. With time, even the most suspicious residents of the town accepted that union, their skepticism melting away in the face of undeniable evidence. Some were even moved to see the man from the capital helping to unload trucks full of supplies, his expensive clothes replaced by simple work clothes, or sweeping the sidewalk in front of the store in the early morning. His transformation was impossible to deny, too consistent and complete to be anything but genuine. One day, Enrique organized a small surprise that would become a cherished memory for both of them. He called Anna to close the store earlier than usual, creating an air of mystery. He had asked for help from several residents to set up a simple table in the central square, illuminated by candles that flickered in the gentle evening breeze and surrounded by flowers that perfumed the air. When Anna arrived, led there by carefully vague directions, she was speechless at the sight before her. "What is this, Henrique?" she asked, laughing and crying at the same time, overwhelmed by the beauty and thoughtfulness of it all. He stood up from where he had been waiting, his heart pounding, and took a small box from his pocket. His voice was thick with emotion as he spoke words that came from the deepest part of his soul. "Anna, I did not arrive here looking for anything except gasoline and maybe some food. I stopped just to buy a few things with no expectations or plans. But I found you, and since then I have also found what truly gives meaning to my life, what makes every day worth living. You showed me what it means to be truly alive. Will you accept to walk with me from here forward? It does not matter where the road takes us, as long as we are together." Tears rolled down Anna's face in streams, her vision blurring as emotion overwhelmed her. She could barely respond, her throat tight with feelings too big for words. She simply nodded emphatically, throwing herself into his arms in the middle of the square, amid the applause and cheers of neighbors who had been watching from a distance, many of them crying themselves at witnessing such pure love. That moment, that question asked in the town square surrounded by people who had become family, was not just a romantic gesture. It was the confirmation that Henrique's choice was irrevocable and complete. He was no longer a man divided between two worlds, torn between competing visions of what his life should be. Now there was only one world, one life, built on the foundation of the love that was born from a simple stop at a countryside store, a love that had grown stronger with each passing day. And so, between the smell of fresh coffee that greeted them each morning, the cheerful tinkling of the bell above the store door, announcing customers who had become friends, and the shared laughter at sunset painting the sky in impossible colors, Henrique and Ana wrote the first pages of a story that would last forever, a story that proved love can find us in the most unexpected places and change everything in an instant. The months that followed were like a gentle breeze of renewal in the life of the millionaire, who was now no longer seen merely as the man from the big city who had suddenly appeared in that small countryside shop. He had become recognized as part of that place, as someone who had found new meaning by choosing to stay, by choosing love over ambition. The clock of big meetings, of million-dollar contracts and travels without pause, no longer ruled his days with iron authority. Now what dictated the rhythm was the opening and closing of the small store, the smell of coffee brewing in the morning, and the smile of the woman who had transformed his entire existence, who had shown him what it meant to truly live. The love that had been born from chance became increasingly solid with each passing season, built with small details but loaded with profound significance. He was no longer the distant and cold man who only looked from afar with enchanted but guarded eyes. Now he helped arrange shelves as if he had been doing it his whole life, carried boxes with ease born of practice, or simply sat at the counter just to talk with her, as if time had no hurry and there was nowhere else in the world he would rather be. With each gesture, with each look they exchanged that spoke volumes without words, the flame of their love grew brighter. And with it grew the certainty that that simple stop at a countryside store had been the greatest event of his life, the moment when everything changed, when he finally found what he had been searching for without knowing it. There were challenging days, certainly, as there are in any life worth living. Suspicious people who murmured about the difference between their two worlds, who predicted failure with the certainty of those who had seen dreams die before. Friendships from his past who did not understand his decision to stay in a place so far from the centers of power and influence. Even doubt in some fleeting moments about how the future would unfold given so many differences in their backgrounds and experiences. But always when such thoughts emerged, threatening to cloud the happiness they had built, it was enough for him to feel the touch of her hand in his, to see the love shining in her eyes, for all uncertainties to disappear like dust carried away by the wind. Love had become stronger than any obstacle, more powerful than fear or doubt, or the opinions of others who could not understand what they had found together. With time, it was not just the millionaire who had changed in fundamental ways. The small store also gained new life and color. He did not bring luxury or excess, did not try to transform it into something it was not. He brought only simple improvements that made the environment more welcoming and warm. Fresh paint in cheerful colors, shelves carefully maintained and organized, a comfortable table where residents could sit to drink coffee and exchange news and stories. The store was no longer just a business, just a place to buy necessities. It had become a meeting point, a space of union and community, a reflection of the care and love that they shared. And there, at that same counter where everything had begun, where their eyes had first met and something inexplicable had passed between them, on a tranquil morning when the sun entered softly through the window and the store was filling with the gentle bustle of daily life, he held her hand across the wooden surface worn smooth by decades of use. He looked deeply into her eyes and said with a voice that was firm but trembling with emotion, "I came here one day looking for something simple. Just fuel and perhaps some food to continue my journey. But I found the greatest gift of my life instead. You showed me what true love really is, showed me what it means to live for something bigger than myself." Tears flowed from her eyes, but they were tears of complete happiness, of someone who knew with absolute certainty that this man had not just stopped at her store by random chance. It was fate that had written their story with meticulous care, that had brought them together against all odds. The kiss that sealed those words, that joined their lives in that moment, was not just the end of a chapter, but the beginning of an entire life together, a future spreading out before them full of promise and possibility. And so the millionaire who once had everything money could buy but felt empty inside, who had achieved every goal except the one that truly mattered, had finally found the only wealth that had always eluded him. He found sincere love, simple in its honesty, and eternal in its depth. Born from the most improbable of places, grown from the smallest of seeds into something that would shelter them both for all their days. If you enjoyed this story, I invite you to leave your thoughts in the comments below. Tell me where you are watching from, what part of the world you call home. Do not forget to subscribe to the channel and leave your like, as it helps tremendously to bring you more stories like this one. Stories of love found in unexpected places, of lives transformed by the courage to choose the heart over the head. Until next time, may you all find your own version of this beautiful love story.